Hey guys, Desolator Magic here, and it's time to show off another deck that I made. Now if you saw my last deck, you might have noticed that it was mono white. I do try to mix things up once in a while, but this one is also mono white. I will say it is very cheap to build this deck, like we're talking $15-20. Unfortunately, unlike Gravity Bomb, which is one of the most powerful decks in all of Standard right now, this is only a so-so deck. It's really fun to play. It's really persistent, and it kind of plays around what the common meta decks are. So, you know, the top net decks and the top themes in the current meta, like control and, you know, counter spells, this plays around it pretty well. Now, there is one exception, and that's this is a little bit of like a middle speed deck. I wouldn't really call it slow, but I wouldn't really call it fast either. It takes a couple turns to really get going, so I would say if a lot of people at your LGS have really fast decks, you should probably not run this one. But for like, you know, $20 tops, hey, why not? I mean, this is a really fun deck. This one is mono white with equipment, and everybody loves an equipment deck. This time we'll start with the mana base. It's really simple. It is 18 plains and 4 Blighted Steppes. You can't get much simpler than that. As far as the equipment, that's where this deck kind of falls short. A lot of the equipment right now is complete crap compared to like Godsend and just other equipment that's just better from, you know, the past couple sets that cycled out. But there's some pretty good stuff in here. I mean, it's enough to start swinging with like 5, 6, 7 attack power creatures. So let's start with True Faith Censer. This piece of equipment goes out for 2 and then equips for 2, and equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has vigilance, which is always nice. And as long as equipped creature is a human, it gets an additional +1 attack. It is almost guaranteed to be a human in this deck. This is actually a multi-tribal deck too, by the way. The next piece of equipment is Inventor's Goggles. I really like these because you cast them for 1, equip it for 2, it gives equipped creature +1/+2, which is pretty good for 1 mana. But also, whenever an artificer enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach Inventor's Goggles to it, completely for free and instantly. There is unfortunately only 1 artificer in the deck, but hey, you know, why not? Definitely do not miss that trigger, though. I kept missing it in playtesting. Next up, we've got one of the best pieces of equipment in all of Standard. This was a huge card with rally decks, Captain's Claws. You cast it for 2, equip it for a mere 1, so it's easier to move around. A lot of dynamic flips. A lot of these are cheap to get out, expensive to equip, but then a lot are also the exact opposite, so very flexible deck. Equipped creature gets +1 attack and +0 defense, which sounds bad, except every time that the equipped creature attacks, put out a 1/1 white core ally creature token. He's also tapped and attacking. There's the fun part. If the currently equipped creature dies, you just move it to the token then. I mean, assuming the token actually made it through. And the last piece of equipment is Slayer's Plate. I'm sure you saw this one coming. Yeah, it's a rare, but it's about a 25 to 50 cent rare, so you don't really have to worry about that. This beastly plate goes out for 3 and equips for 3, but it gives the equipped creature +4/+2. Whenever equipped creature dies, if it was a human, put a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying onto the battlefield. And like I said, a lot of humans in this deck. Now there is one standalone enchantment that this entire deck is built around, but if this doesn't come into play in a given game, it really doesn't matter. It's just there to really help things out, but it's not like a terribly important combo piece. This unbelievable card comes out for 1 and says you may cast aura and equipment spells as though they had flash. I mean, that's just crazy. But also, whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach it to target creature you control. So you flash it in, equip it, and then block. Or you could flash it in the middle of combat. I mean, that's just crazy with equipment. Completely crazy. Initially, people thought that card would skyrocket value-wise, but nobody really did anything creative with it, probably because all the equipment right now kind of sucks. The only other non-creature is an aura, which, you know, a couple cards reference. It's Faith Unbroken. You guys know it's no secret. I absolutely love this card. It gives the enchanted creature +2/+2, and also, when it enters the battlefield, you can exile target creature an opponent controls until Faith Unbroken leaves the battlefield. Your creatures are pretty hard to kill in this deck, so yeah, I mean, throw it on the strongest one and call it a day. Next up, we've got the spell Strength of Arms, and the reason this looks really short on creatures, this whole deck, is because I consider this a creature. It says target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If you control an equipment, which you will, put a 1/1 white human soldier creature token onto the battlefield. So I would say that about 99% of the time you're going to get a white human soldier token for 1, and this is also like a saving type of card in case somebody's dealing damage to your creature. It's also an ambush, so you can ambush kill somebody who's blocking. It's just a fantastic card for 1. So with this lineup of supporting cards, the creature lineup must be immensely powerful, right? Well, I don't know if that's how I would describe it. It's at least a 6 out of 10. We've got Militant Inquisitor for 3. I kind of wish this didn't cost 3. It gets +1 attack for each equipment you control. And chances are you'll have 2 or 3 on the battlefield at any given time. They don't have to be equipped. They don't have to be equipped on this creature. They just need to exist. So for 3 mana, it can get out of control pretty quickly. Next up, we've got Ironclad Slayer. I actually had multiple of these in my pre-release deck, believe it or not. I think I had like 3. It's a little pricey at 3, but it is a 3/2, and when it enters the battlefield, you may return target aura or equipment card from your graveyard to your hand. Now, let's be honest, your equipment isn't going to the graveyard. That's just not going to happen. If for some reason it did, you could bring it back, I guess. It's free, you don't have to pay for it. Otherwise, this guy is purely there to go get Faith Unbroken. Next up, we've got the kind of not so fitting aerial responder. He's a dwarf soldier, not an artificer, not a human. So if you really wanted to throw in like an artificer or especially a human, you could. But you know why this guy's in here. He's in all my decks. Flying, Vigilance, Lifelink, 2/3. I got this guy up to 8 attack on turn 4. It's just so much lifelink and vigilance, blocking. You throw equipment on him, he's just too big to deal with. He's just unstoppable, and he keeps your deck going. You would have a couple more triggers going off if he was a human, but he's so powerful by himself, I wouldn't necessarily take him out. The final creature, and no surprise here, the Dwarf Artificer, which I wish was a human artificer, Toolcraft Exemplar. He's a 1/1 for 1, except that he's pretty much always a 3/2. This guy doesn't care about equipment, he just cares about artifacts. So, big difference in this deck. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control an artifact, Toolcraft Exemplar gets +2/+1 until end of turn. If you control 3 or more artifacts, it also gains first strike until end of turn. So this guy goes from okay to out of control to completely bonkers. Typically, he's the first creature that I will throw equipment onto as far as equipping it. And it makes sense because, he doesn't have like the on-death trigger with Slayer's Plate as a human, but who cares? He'll be so stupidly big, they just can't stop him. And this really, really, really shows up early. We're talking turn 4, 5, 6, you're swinging with just outrageous creatures. The best part about an equipment deck, no surprise if anybody out there has played it, they just keep coming. You've got to almost blow up everything twice because, Captain's Claws just moves. The Inventor's Goggles, they just move. As soon as you kill a creature, you could stack up 8 more pieces of equipment on something else and just swing with that. Equipment is basically just auras that can move around. So like I said, this deck, it's a little slow, it has some weaknesses, it doesn't have absolutely flawless synergy, but when I saw some of these cards like Toolcraft and Sigardas and Captain's Claws, I just really wanted to build this deck. It's just so good. I don't know if it would necessarily consistently win Friday Night Magic, but if you're a good enough player and you don't miss any triggers, it would definitely stand a chance. You guys know that my channel is all about budget decks that actually stand a chance, or are just wacky and fun to play, and I put this one about halfway in between. And of course, even though this is more like equipping armor than chopping off your arm and replacing it with stuff, I still called this the Cyborgs deck. If it's not completely logical, why did I do it? Well, obviously just solely because it sounds cooler. If there's one thing I would say about the gameplay, I would say it plays differently every time, and that's a good thing. Sometimes you'll get out Sigarda's Aid and people are like, oh, I get it. But other times you'll just have one single unstoppable creature with like a ridiculous amount of equipment stacked up on them. And then the next game, you're throwing out, 5, 6, 7 tokens. Now they have to worry about tokens. You just can't sideboard against this deck without knowing what's in it. And even if you knew what was in it, you don't know what's going to end up in their opening hand. This deck is very non-competitive, and it's the exact type of deck that I was talking about in the other tips video, where I said that, you know, the pros say you want a consistent deck. You want it consistent. It works the same every time. While consistency, what they really mean is it functions. It doesn't just like stall out and become a disaster. But anything past that, you want it to work differently every single time. You do not want your opponent to be able to adapt to your win condition. So if your win condition is something like hit them in the face until they're at 0, I mean, there you go. Good luck adapting to that. So have fun with this deck, and I'll see you guys next video.